Welcome to the video. My name is Austin Colburn, and you're watching my final project for the course ORGL 535, Listen, Discern, and Decide, taught by Dr. Larry Spears as part of the Masters of Organizational Leadership program at Gonzaga University. In this video, I'll be discussing three main ideas and how they contribute to development as a servant leader. The first being an entry into silence, the next being the use of silence as an entry into listening, and the third, listening as an entry into discernment. All of my sources will be cited in the description below the video. I encourage any viewers unaffiliated with Gonzaga University to give them a look. Now, we begin. First, I'll be discussing an entry into silence, or more appropriately, how and why one might enter into silence. The silence I'm referring to is Robert Sardello's capital S silence, not the absence of noise that we know casually. It's the silence that can be felt from the inside out. Silence is something that must be practiced. It cannot be attained through simple study or empty promises that practice later. The noisy, productive world is too addictive for silence to be allowed to foster uncultivated. The productive world can take its toll in one particularly significant way, living without giving oneself room for reflection, leading to repeating the same mistakes again and again. Two insights may come from this. It may take a force great enough to shake someone loose from the life they've been living, or it may also take a loving friend or mentor to help parse through those mistakes to recover the lessons lost along the way, and to sit patiently while they do so. For this, I have an example somewhat removed from modern life, but that serves as an effective tool in understanding the role silence, reflection, and mentorship can have on a person's development. In Hermann Hesse's book Siddhartha, the titular character puts aside his former life as a Brahmin and Samana, and played at being an advisor to the merchant Kamaswami. Without reflecting on his actions or taking time to meditate and study as he once had, Siddhartha became the things he had once mocked others for being child people who were given to be lazy, ill-tempered, and weak to vice, and all things that he had become until he realized it for himself. Further in the tale, Siddhartha's friends Govinda and the ferryman Vasudeva helped him unlearn what had become under Kamaswami and grown beyond what he had before. From the individual to the institutional, silence and listening are related. At the bottom, silence needs to be practiced as a communal process integrated in conversation. This gives room for reflection, attention, and openness within conversations, rather than after they've ended. Once silence is allowed in, the speakers must also listen, but properly. Organizational listening scholar Madeline Burley-Allen says no half-listening and no listening too hard either. Ideally, this can cut down on the information lost due to poor, inadequate listening and can inform both small-scale decision-making and more strategic endeavors. Listening is key for understanding complex relationships and conflicts. In general, the right and wrong answers to large problems, especially involving values and beliefs, may only be clear in as far as it is clear to that party what feels right and what feels wrong. Listening, then, is key in situations where the next most probable resolution would involve coercive measures to arrive at. Robert K. Greenleaf suggests that persuasion on an individual level is always preferable to coercion and requires listening, though one mind changed means little in the grand scheme of one organization. Where consensus can be made, it should be. Everywhere else, as much can be done without coercion and with minimal manipulation must be. John Woolman would seem to be one of Greenleaf's favorite examples for persuasion. Woolman made his life's work traveling up and down the east coast of the United States, gently persuading his fellow Quakers who owned enslaved peoples to free them. He did this for 30 years, questioning his fellow Quakers on what they thought the cost of slavery would be for their own souls. By 1770, no men were held in bondage by the Quakers, a full 91 years before the American Civil War had begun. J. Michael Sparough, an author on Jesuit methods and Ignatian decision-making, lays plain that in order to actually discern anything, one would first have to clear the noise in order to prepare to receive whatever gifts are necessary to make the decision, to choose good, disregarding any and all options that are anything less, and understanding that self-actualization on the way towards achieving a truer happiness is part of God's will and reign, or as I would put it, a collective destiny. The main idea of discernment is to identify which options in a decision are consoling and to avoid those that bring desolation. Consolations can be good, pleasant, and peaceful, but don't always have to be. Rather, consolation should bring someone closer to the collective destiny rather than push them away. In this way, challenging or tragic events can bring consolation even if they don't bring joy or peace. This last example is one from my own life. my current work at the Tacoma Rescue Mission's family shelter, and concerns the difference between consolation and desolation. As the intake specialist, my role is to decide which families who call us will receive our services. There is a whole procedure in place to facilitate this in a way that approaches efficient, equitable, and just, but there are shortcomings. It took time, but I've come to see the inner turmoil I feel on some days for having to reject some of those families as a consolation, a feeling of rightness in the understanding that we are far from our collective destiny, and that the work I do is in service of that destiny. This motivates me to pursue further opportunities to seek justice and care for those in need. If this was a desolation, I imagine I'd have quit already. And with that, we come to a close. This presentation is mostly based on my own interpretations of silence, listening, and discernment, but proof that I've done the work. I make room for silence in my life to allow myself to listen and prepare myself to discern, not only for my own sake, but for that of the people my decisions may impact. I hope that after having watched this presentation, you might feel a little more open to the idea of silence, listening, and discernment in the service of growing as a servant leader yourself. As mentioned before, my list of references can be found in the video's description below. Thanks once again for watching, and I hope you have a blessed day.